Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton did not drop a cute little lunch moment into the middle of a random afternoon. Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton dropped a perfectly wrapped clue bag into the middle of a very controlled photo opportunity. And the clue bag was not lunch. The clue bag was the message. The clue bag was the caption. The clue bag was the entire operation. Look at the sequence. Lewis Hamilton arrives. Lewis Hamilton carries a white bag high enough for cameras to catch every angle. Lewis Hamilton flashes enough charm to soften suspicion. Kim Kardashian just happens to be nearby on set. Paparazzi happen to be ready. The bag just happens to read like care, romance, and domestic sweetness. Nothing about that chain of events feels accidental. Everything about that chain of events feels storyboarded. Because real secrecy does not step out of a car holding a prop like a stage actor waiting for a spotlight. Real intimacy does not need a witness. Real chemistry does not need visual proof of carbohydrates. Real couples do not announce tenderness with a bag placement, a hallway handoff, and a camera line already loaded. That detail right there is the first red siren. Not the bag. Not the smile. Not the curly hair. The timing. The timing is screaming louder than the gossip blogs. Random celebrity movement does not usually produce a clean paparazzi angle unless somebody wanted a clean paparazzi angle. Celebrity culture has many mysteries. Celebrity culture does not have mystery when a camera is already parked at the exact curb where the alleged private gesture lands. So the question is not, did Lewis Hamilton bring food? The question is, who needed the world to see Lewis Hamilton bring food? Because lunch can sit in a passenger seat. Lunch can stay below window level. Lunch can travel through a side entrance. Lunch can go through security. Lunch can arrive without a performance. But this lunch arrived like a press release wearing takeout packaging. The public is not being asked to believe in romance. The public is being asked to participate in romance theater. Big difference. Romance feels messy, inconvenient, a little unflattering, a little unplanned. Romance theater feels polished, legible, and camera safe. Romance theater always includes one giant blinking sign that says, "Please notice the gesture." That bag was the blinking sign. Now zoom out and the pattern gets even louder. Kim Kardashian never moves inside public imagination without image math. Image math is brand oxygen. Every gesture has a possible secondary use. Every candid can become a headline. Every headline can become a mood correction. Every mood correction can become audience reprogramming. When audience fatigue starts creeping in, spectacle enters the group chat. Not always a scandal. Sometimes a tease. Sometimes a wink. Sometimes a suspiciously visible lunch run from a globally famous athlete. And Lewis Hamilton stepping into that frame changes the temperature immediately. Lewis Hamilton is not random wallpaper. Lewis Hamilton carries prestige, money, discipline, speed, glamour, and just enough distance from Kardashian world to feel fresh. A lunch bag from a random assistant says nothing. A lunch bag from Lewis Hamilton says, "Look again. Maybe a new chapter is here." That difference matters. That last point matters most because this entire scene reads like a stress test. Not a relationship reveal. Not a sweeping declaration. A test. A tiny lab experiment dropped into the gossip bloodstream. Release one photo set. Track engagement. Watch comment sections split into believers, skeptics, shamers, and defenders. Measure pickup. Measure mockery. Measure how much curiosity still exists around Kim Kardashian's private life. Measure how much crossover interest Lewis Hamilton can generate outside sports audiences. That is not lunch. That is market research with napkins. Now take another look at the body language. The energy does not read stolen moment. The energy reads presentation. The energy reads, here is the object. Here is the evidence. Here is the visual everybody needs to screenshot. Even the handoff aura feels overly readable. And overly readable is deadly when spontaneity is the product being sold. And then comes the second siren. Food as emotional symbolism. Food is one of the oldest PR props in the world because food suggests care without demanding evidence of deeper intimacy. Flowers can be too obvious. Jewelry can be too serious. Holding hands can be too definitive. Dinner dates can trigger heavy scrutiny. But a bag of food? A bag of food says, look how natural. Look how sweet. Look how ordinary. Food is the perfect low-risk romance prop because food can always hide behind innocence. Maybe Lewis Hamilton was just being nice. Exactly. That sentence is the shield. That sentence is why this visual works as bait. Now let us talk about the paparazzi problem because that problem refuses to go away. Celebrity sightings do happen. True. Paparazzi do get lucky. True. But coincidence has texture, and this scene sounds too neat. A world-famous Formula One driver allegedly delivering food to Kim Kardashian at the exact moment cameras can identify the bag, the face, the approach, the mood, and the implied dynamic. That stretch needs a chiropractor. A camera finding Lewis Hamilton entering a visible location is one thing. A camera catching the emotional purpose of the visit is another thing entirely. The second version usually requires expectation. Somebody knew what to wait for, when to wait for it, and why the image mattered. That alone flips this from possible to performative. That is the hidden villain angle in this story. Not romance. Not even the celebrities. The hidden villain is legibility. The entire scene was too legible. Every element translated too fast. Viewers did not have to search for the intended read. The intended read was sitting in a white bag under studio lights. Now comes the part nobody wants to say out loud. A stunt does not fail just because the audience notices the wires. A stunt can still work while the audience laughs. In fact, mockery can be half the engine. Eye-roll engagement still counts as engagement. Quote tweets still move the story. Reaction videos still widen the reach. Disbelief still amplifies the frame. A scene can succeed precisely because the audience starts fighting about whether the scene was staged. This rumor had a ring light. Now, another piece of the puzzle. The lunch itself was never supposed to feel luxurious. That matters. If a setup wants audience buy-in, the prop needs to feel relatable. Not diamonds. Not yachts. Not a convoy. Lunch. Everyday lunch. The simplest possible gesture, chosen for maximum emotional readability. That simplicity is exactly what makes the scene look more crafted, not less. A publicist-minded move often hides inside ordinary objects because ordinary objects pass through defenses faster. A bouquet screams campaign. A lunch bag whispers boyfriend. Whispers travel farther. Because nobody watching that moment asked, what was inside? And that right there is the autopsy. And this is where the forgotten detail angle becomes lethal. Lewis Hamilton did not need to remove personal food from the bag first if the mission was pure convenience. That little visual logic problem creates a weird theatrical image. One meal exits. One meal remains. One person becomes courier. One camera catches the domestication ritual. That does not feel like convenience. That feels like blocking. Blocking matters. Theater directors use blocking to guide audience attention without dialogue. Enter from stage left. Hold the object chest high. Pause near the mark. Angle the body. Reveal the relationship dynamic without saying a word. That is exactly why the scene has such an uncanny aftertaste. The scene reads less like life and more like blocking. And once a gossip moment starts reading like blocking, suspicion stops being cynicism. Suspicion becomes basic media literacy. Another thing. Real power couples, real rumored couples, real flings, and real situationships usually leak in uneven ways. A car together here. A low-quality distance shot there. Maybe a dinner departure with both faces half hidden. Maybe a staff whisper with no visual. But a clean food delivery visual is strangely optimized because food delivery gives audience members a story arc in one frame. Thoughtfulness, effort, sweetness, intention, proximity. That is screenplay compression. This scene is compressed storytelling. A public court in compressed storytelling should always look for the cut lines. Where did the scene begin? Who framed the emotional takeaway? Why did the visual arrive already translated? Who benefits from a romance rumor that stays deniable but highly clickable? Those questions point to one ugly answer. Somebody wanted attention without accountability. That is the sweet spot for modern celebrity management. Maximum chatter. Minimum confirmation. High replay value. No promises. No labels. No direct lie. Just an image placed gently in the bloodstream and allowed to mutate. And Kim Kardashian has played in that territory for years. Not always maliciously. Not always cynically. But effectively. Very effectively. The formula is simple. Give the audience a clue, let the audience build a castle, then step back while every outlet races to decorate the walls. That same architecture fits this lunch scene almost perfectly. Lewis Hamilton's role in that architecture is what makes the scene hotter. Lewis Hamilton brings a whole different mythology. Polish, discipline, elite circles, mystery, and aspirational masculinity with international sheen. Pairing that mythology with Kim Kardashian's image machine creates a gossip hybrid too efficient to ignore. That is why even skeptics cannot fully look away. The pairing is ridiculous enough to spark debate and plausible enough to trend. That balance is gold. Too absurd, and nobody buys the setup. Too believable, and the setup becomes risky. This pairing lands in the profitable middle where conversation explodes before proof arrives. Now imagine the meeting behind closed doors. Nobody even needs to say, fake relationship, for a move like this to happen. Somebody only needs to say, a light public crossover could be useful. Somebody else only needs to say, nothing heavy, nothing direct, just enough to stir buzz. Another voice only needs to add, make the visual human. Enter the lunch bag. Enter the curb. Enter the camera. Enter the discourse. That is why this scene feels less like romance and more like calibration. Calibration asks, how much will the audience tolerate? Calibration asks, how much mockery still converts into reach? Calibration asks, can two giant names manufacture intrigue from almost nothing? Calibration asks, can a white bag do the labor of a hard launch without the risk of a hard launch? Answer: absolutely. Now, a lot of viewers get uncomfortable when celebrity gossip analysis moves from what happened into why this visual was chosen. But that is the whole game. The visible object is never only the visible object. The object is a delivery vehicle for narrative. Coffee cups do this. Hoodies do this. Car rides do this. Exit timing does this. Airport hugs do this. Bags definitely do this. And the more boring the object, the more powerful the object can become because ordinary objects lower skepticism at first glance. Then the second glance hits. And the second glance on this scene is devastating. A billionaire-adjacent image operator and a global sports icon supposedly stumble into the exact kind of visual tabloids love most. Soft domestic service with romantic implications and almost zero downside. No screaming match. No club exit. No confrontation. No awkward statement. Just care in a bag. That is too clean. Way too clean. Even the choice of gesture has built-in emotional coding. Bringing food suggests concern. Bringing food suggests checking in. Bringing food suggests thoughtful man energy. Bringing food suggests a rhythm deeper than casual acquaintance. The visual does not need a kiss because the bag does the kissing for the headline. That is why the bag is not neutral. The bag is loaded language. And once that loaded language gets photographed, every viewer fills in the missing chapter differently. Some viewers see boyfriend behavior. Some viewers see PR behavior. Some viewers see mutual clout exchange. Some viewers see harmless flirting. But almost nobody sees truly random behavior. That consensus alone says plenty. If the setup had been invisible, nobody would care. If the setup had been messy, fewer people would suspect. If the setup had been private, there would be no operation. The camera made the rumor. The bag sold the rumor. The timing exposed the rumor. Now let us talk about desperation, because desperation always leaves fingerprints. Not all desperation looks frantic. Elite desperation often looks polished. Elite desperation often arrives moisturized, camera-ready, and suspiciously casual. Elite desperation does not scream. Please believe this. Elite desperation smiles and hands over a bag. That is why glossy moments can feel more desperate than messy moments. The tidiness reveals intent. And when two wealthy famous people appear to need a staged domestic symbol to manufacture intrigue, the result is not aspirational. The result is a little sad. Because the audience starts seeing the mechanism instead of the magic. The audience starts hearing the gears turning. The audience starts realizing that modern fame can reach a point where even lunch has to audition. That is brutal. Because once the audience sees the audition, future scenes get harder to sell. The next spotted together moment gets analyzed harder. The next smile gets slowed down. The next doorway gets treated like a crime scene. Stunts have diminishing returns when execution gets too visible. And maybe that is why this whole thing is weirdly fascinating. Not because Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton make impossible tabloid material. Quite the opposite. Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton make very possible tabloid material. The fascination comes from how loudly this possible rumor seems to have announced itself. A good soft launch should leave audiences debating the relationship. This one left audiences debating the logistics. That is a problem. No rumor wants the camera placement to become the main character. No romance tease wants the prop strategy to outshine the chemistry. No maybe moment wants viewers talking more about paparazzi timing than mutual attraction. Yet that is exactly what happened here. And once the logistics overshadow the fantasy collapses into content. The scene stops functioning as seduction and starts functioning as case study. Viewers stop asking, are Kim Kardashian and Lewis Hamilton happening? Viewers start asking, who thought this would read as natural? That question bites. Because the honest answer might be, the machine did not need natural. The machine only needed loud. Loud does not always mean volume. Loud can mean symbolic clarity. Loud can mean internet readability. Loud can mean one frame creating 10,000 opinions in under an hour. By that standard, the scene worked beautifully. The scene was loud. Very loud. So loud that even skepticism became promotional fuel. That is why a lot of celebrity operations never care whether the audience buys the fairy tale. The operation only cares whether the audience repeats the fairy tale. Repetition is oxygen. Repetition is reach. Repetition is ranking. Repetition is free distribution. A rumor repeated by critics still dominates the room. Kim Kardashian understands repetition. Lewis Hamilton definitely understands visibility. Put those two realities together and the lunch drop circus starts looking less like accident and more like arithmetic. Now for the sharpest blade of all. If a relationship is secure, appealing, and organically magnetic, a team does not need a white bag to convince strangers of tenderness. The vibe carries itself. The chemistry leaks through bad angles. The audience senses depth even through mess. But when a narrative needs a prop that's obvious, the audience starts wondering whether the prop is doing all the lifting. And that is exactly what happened here. The bag did the lifting. The bag did more emotional labor than the alleged couple. The bag was the romance intern. The bag clocked in early, stood on the mark, found the lens, and earned the headline. Meanwhile, the alleged spark stayed theoretical. That is almost comedic. Actually, not almost. Fully comedic. Because this kind of scene accidentally reveals the emptiest truth inside fame. Sometimes the image is not there to document the feeling. Sometimes the image is there to replace the feeling. Once that replacement happens, public reaction shifts from enchantment to mockery. And mockery is exactly where this story landed for a lot of viewers. So where does that leave the verdict? The verdict is not confirmed fake relationship. That claim goes too far. The verdict is not definite romance. That claim ignores the wires. The verdict is simpler and meaner. This looked like a deliberately visible intimacy cue designed to trigger romance discourse at minimal risk. A visibility stunt. A deniable soft launch. A lunch bag pilot episode. And the strongest piece of evidence is not some leaked text, not some insider whisper, not some body language guru nonsense. The strongest piece of evidence is the oldest clue in entertainment. The scene knew where the audience was sitting. That alone turns the whole story from sweet to suspicious. Because spontaneous affection forgets the audience. Performance always finds the lens. Lewis Hamilton found the lens. Kim Kardashian benefited from the lens. The bag served the lens. And the internet did exactly what the lens was counting on. Mission accomplished. At least for now. But one warning belongs at the end of this circus. Once a fame machine teaches the public to doubt basic gestures, every future gesture gets taxed. The next gift looks planted. The next smile looks assigned. The next sighting looks booked. That is the long-term cost of playing with symbolic intimacy in public. The short-term headline may sparkle, but the long-term trust starts rotting. And trust is the one prop that no assistant can carry into frame. So yes, maybe Lewis Hamilton brought food. Maybe Kim Kardashian accepted food. Maybe both names shared a genuine off-camera energy. Maybe the whole thing began with something real. None of those possibilities erase the staging smell. None of those possibilities explain the camera certainty. None of those possibilities change the fact that this scene looked less like a private gesture and more like a public test balloon floating on takeout fumes. That is why the final read stays the same. Not love story. Not power couple reveal. Not organic spark. Presentation. Beautifully packaged presentation. A white bag illusion with paparazzi ribbons. And the funniest part of all? The public was never supposed to stare at the bag long enough to notice the strings. The public was supposed to feel the sweetness and keep scrolling. But the public stopped. The public looked closer. The public noticed the blocking. The public noticed the timing. The public noticed the hard sell hiding inside the soft gesture. Once that happens, the spell is over. And all that remains is a luxury lunch run that somehow managed to look hungrier for attention than either celebrity looked hungry for food. That right there is the real meal. That right there is the whole circus. And that right there is why this scene will keep getting laughed at long after the bag is gone.